Anyway, so my name is Clara. I am a user experience researcher at Google, and one of my focuses, in addition to design tools and systems and all those good things, is artificial intelligence. So sort of a callback to what we just talked about with the barcodes on our foreheads and things, like thinking about what humans of the future and AI of the future might look like. So today I'm going to talk about where things might be going someday. This is very speculative. This is based on some of the research that my team has done, some things that are happening in the industry, and honestly, a whole lot of questions that we have. So I mentioned researcher. At Google, I work on material design. It's a design system, and there's an excellent talk on design systems earlier today. If you want to learn even more about design systems, you can go check out material.io. Which is Google's design system site. If you use any Google products, you've probably seen Material. It appears in most Google products, but it's also available open source at material.io. Learn about fonts, learn about design systems, colors, all those good things. And one of the things that we're also interested in on my team is just the state of design writ large. Where are things going? What are the trends in design? And as people are talking about AI, that becomes a hot topic. How might it shape AI, how might it shape design in the future? Before I get into that stuff, though, a little bit about myself. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm American. I started my career, and I actually grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I know there's at least one other Boston Q. Yes, okay, cool. I have some brethren here. Shout out to my East Coast friends. So I started my career in Boston. I was working at a healthcare UX company where we were building tools for doctors and other medical practitioners. So think about things like, what's the UX behind prescribing medication, or filling out a patient chart, or sending referrals, or all kinds of things that you might do if you're a healthcare provider or a patient. And then about 7 years ago, I moved out to the West Coast, to San Francisco, which is part of Silicon Valley. I joined a startup that was building artificial intelligence developer tools, and I founded the UX team there, was there for a couple of years, and then I moved to Google to join Material, where I've been ever since. So I think looking at my career, I've actually spent a lot of time on tools, workflows, enterprise things, basically thinking about how we can use technology to help people make things, help people do things that they're already doing, but perhaps a little bit more efficiently. So that takes us to today. It's 2023. AI is everywhere, whether you realize it or not. I think one of my favorite things about AI, and especially AI in this day and age, is that there are a lot of what I might call folk theories about it. A lot of people have opinions on AI or opinions on how they would define it. There are a lot of concerns and a lot of excitement. Some people say robots are everywhere. They're going to do everything for us. They're in our stuff. They're in our lives. They're in our homes. Sometimes they're literally in your home. How many people here have a smart speaker, like an Alexa, Home Hub, Google Home? Yeah, a good chunk of you do. So that's another example of something that might be AI powered that you might have around you. I know we talked a little bit about drones earlier and whether or not they're a failed piece of design, but people are using them. Some of them are used for smart purposes. You can think about a smart camera. You can think about drones for deliveries. So it's something that could be quotidian, but it's really shaping how we do things, and it's AI powered. So in addition to AI for fun or not so fun, it's also permeating our productivity tools. So over on the right-hand side, up top is Gmail. Gmail has a smart reply feature. So if you send a message to your friend Alice, you're replying to her, Gmail might suggest to you, "Dear Alice," or "Hey Alice." Down below is Android Studio, which is an IDE for developers who are building for Android. And that, like other developer tools, has code completion. So these small kind of AI-powered assists that show up in a lot of productivity tools. These are just one of many. There are lots of examples out there in stuff that you probably use day to day for your work or have used in the past. Subtle, but definitely there. So what does this mean for creativity and a lot of the things that I know many of us in this room do? So over the last couple of years, we started to see the advent of AI, or sorry, not even years, like months. Getting ahead of myself here. Last few months, we started to see this explosion of AI in creative spaces. DALL-E, how many folks have used DALL-E or Midjourney, ChatGPT? Yes, so like the big exciting things that are taking the world by storm right now. So these tools have allowed people to generate illustrations and images, and ChatGPT has allowed for people to write to write content, to write poetry, to write songs, to generate all kinds of verbiage. It can be a tool for fun. It can be a tool that people are starting to bring into their creative workflows. It starts to set an interesting precedent. AI is here, and it's starting to guide creative work. But as creative professionals, what's your take? What do you think this means and portends for the future of UX design? What do we think AI-driven design might mean? So this is ultimately a big question that I think a lot of us are starting to think about. But at the same time, it's also not even necessarily new. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a rise in AI-powered functionality in design tools. One canonical example is auto layout, which many of you might have used. It basically just automatically sets up your design for different settings. And it's been a staple of design workflows for some time. And now with all these generative AI technologies, so ChatGPT, DALL-E, Midjourney, and so on, we've seen rise in Figma plugins and other sort of assistant plugins in design tools to bring that generative AI directly to work. So this isn't necessarily new, even though it feels like it's a big moment in time. One of the things that my team has been interested in over the last couple of years is as we think about AI in design, is it cool? Is it creepy? Is it something else? Is it a mix? And for the focus of this talk, I'm going to look at the impact and potential for AI in assistive tooling or assistive tooling in the design process. Really, how do designers feel about AI-powered tools or functionality? How does it help them? But also, how does it inhibit potentially? So talk a little bit about our work. Said another way, what value, if any, does AI bring to the design process? We've mostly talked to designers, but we're also interested in other UXers. There are lots of different types of UXers and people in the creative process. So this is definitely an ongoing question. And again, if it's something you're interested in or something you're doing work on, I would love to talk to you. What opportunities does it unlock for them? What are they looking for? What can it do? The asterisk here is something I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, but sometimes things appear to be AI, but they're technically not. If you work on AI, if you're knowledgeable about how AI works under the hood, you might say, yeah, this is AI and this is just pure computation. But what we found in a lot of our work, and I'm sure many of you have encountered this as well, is that sometimes something isn't actually AI per the definition of it, but it appears to be. So for the purposes of this talk and for our research, we're just treating it all as the same thing. Okay, so once again, kind of the mantra we'll be saying multiple times throughout this talk, this is new, but it's also not new. Automation has been around for a long time, and with it has come both enthusiasm and concern. A lot of people in the organizational industrial psychology space, IO psychology, manufacturing, a number of other of those spaces have really reconciled with this question: to what extent does automation enable professionals and explorers and enthusiasts and consumers to enter new domains, to automate parts of their job that they're less keen on, or tasks they don't like to do? And to what extent does it interfere? So this is something, you can go back decades and look at literature here, and I think it's a clear controversy. It does a lot of good, and it also can make things harder. Many researchers in these spaces have looked at where do professionals embrace automation and where do they stray away from it. One example is that automation might help people do a task more efficiently, might help them make fewer mistakes, and critically, say in the healthcare space, it might even help them save lives. But others worry that using automation actually complicates their work. Sometimes AI misunderstands intent. And worse, sometimes they fear that it threatens their job. But other users, particularly experts in a given field, and we'll talk about this more in a minute in the UX designer case, have embraced automation for what it allows them to do. By speeding up their work and taking on some of the more tedious tasks, automation or AI-driven tooling allows them to focus on work that they're more excited about and do the more sophisticated techniques. So one example is film editing. Back in the day, you had to do what this person did to edit a film. You literally had a strip of film, you would cut it up, you would paste it together, and you kind of had this one shot. It was a very manual process. Now we have technology like iMovie, or even stuff you can do on your own phone, where you can cut and splice things digitally. You don't have to be a film expert, certainly don't have to know how to do that in order to make a pretty decent looking film. So this opens the door to enthusiasts or explorers, people who are novices in the domain but want to try it out. But it also benefits people who are professionals, who know how to do the basics but might not want to, and then they can just focus on the more sophisticated techniques. So you see how automation is delivering this dual benefit. It enables the novice users to try something, and it sort of extrapolates away that mundane or difficult hurdles of learning. And then it unlocks the door to more advanced work for those who are experts. So when we think about AI in the design process, or AI in work in general, one of our hypotheses was that AI is valuable to the extent that it extrapolates away the mundane, that it allows people to focus on the things that are more interesting and removes those tedious tasks. I'm not going to get into all the details of the research. We actually have a paper coming out at CHI later, a case study coming out at CHI later this spring, so I'm happy to share that with folks who are interested if you want to read more about the nitty-gritty of what we did. But in general, this is a multi-year project. We did a bunch of different studies. We did a lot of participatory design, ran a survey, and critically, this is a space where there's also a lot of academic work going on. A lot of researchers at universities are looking into this space, and we've been lucky enough to talk to a number of them. So if you're curious, I'm happy to point you in their direction too. All right, so to study these things, you can take many tacks. One of the things that we found particularly successful is looking at participatory design and collaborative research, generally through workshops. We often brought in designers, professional designers, UX designers, to co-create with us. So think about your workflow, think about what is or isn't working, and then what kinds of assists or automations or interventions would you be looking for in order to make something better? Because this work can be deeply personal, as we said before, whenever you're bringing automation into someone's work, they often have concerns about it, whether it's about screwing up the task for them or actually basically replacing them. So when you're thinking about this space and what the possibilities might be, you really want to center the end users. Now this is interesting because, say, compared to my work at my previous company with doctors, people on my team, other researchers that I know, like, we are potentially the target users. But we're close to the work, we have a different opinion, so you absolutely want to center designers writ large, bring in people across the industry to get their perspective. So for collaborative research like this, we generated lots of different types of artifacts. This was a workshop that we actually participated in at CHI last year, Computer Human Interaction Conference, where we just made like pipe cleaner and popsicle stick, lolly stick kinds of prototypes. So you could have some really, really wacky prototypes. You can also do paper prototypes. You can have storyboards. You can even just have statements about what you think a potential solution might look like. It doesn't have to be super complicated. So once you have some kind of what I might call like a conversation piece, so something that represents an idea, then you can go do concept testing. And I really truly believe that, I'm going to say this, I might take it back, but when I was writing this talk, I was thinking, this is, for me, concept testing feels like one of the most important things you can do as a user researcher. The point of concept testing is really to ask, what is the perceived value of this approach or of this concept? I think sometimes, especially with with any tool, and often with any technology, or any new and hot technology, it can be easy to put the cart before the horse and assume that the tool or the technology solves a problem. But you might not even be identifying the real problem, let alone the appropriate solution to it. So concept testing is a way to take something and put it in front of people and say, yes, this is the sort of thing that is solving the right problem or not. I've seen this done with Wizard of Oz techniques, so where you're simulating AI, but it's not actually AI. You can make a kind of a scrappy prototype. You can do it with things on, with storyboards. You can even do something that is pretty simple. Someone earlier, I think it was Bear, was talking about how details can be really distracting when you're testing or when you're getting feedback. And this is an example of a situation where it can be really good to have something that's very simple, because people will react to the concept rather than to the finer details, like the color, typography. That said, AI is a little bit different because it behaves in a somewhat unpredictable way. So you still want to make sure that you're simulating some kind of intelligent, quote-unquote, response, and that's where Wizard of Oz or other techniques can come in. And later on, I'll show you a resource that you can look at to learn more about those techniques. One of the things that we did more recently was a survey with UX professionals, so mostly designers, to understand what role AI might play in their process. We ran the survey to ask about their attitudes towards AI in their work, AI in general, and then we actually took some of the outputs of one of those workshops we did. We came up with these short vignettes, sort of 2-sentence explanations of a potential theoretical assistive technology, so a piece of speculative design. And we asked them to tell us what they thought these speculative scenarios would let them do, and then how likely they would be to use it, and also what the drawbacks were. So it helped us understand kind of the parameters of where AI might or might not fit into their process, per how they were thinking about it. So one example is this one. Imagine you had a design tool that could recreate your design for any layout or device. So when you use this tool, you can automatically convert a design for iOS into a design for a large screen display. So this, again, is a hypothetical scenario, but we asked them, what do you think this would do for you? And what's the likelihood that you would use it, and what are your concerns? What are the barriers? So one advantage to doing this, I wouldn't say it replaces concept testing, but one advantage to taking this approach is it's a survey. So you can ask a lot of people a lot of things very quickly and get a lot of feedback. The disadvantage, of course, is that nuances are lost. People are going to interpret this differently. They might not understand what you mean, and then they might tell you things and you don't have a way to follow up with them because it's a survey. So I would say this is a great technique, but it's always good to balance with concept testing as well. So what did we learn? There's a lot here, but I would say at large there were 2 major categories of things places we found AI benefiting users or benefiting designers. So one of them is that efficiency space. So that's sort of the tedious tasks, catching mistakes, things that will help you find problems that you might not turn up otherwise. The other is innovation. So helping you figure out what might be out there that you might not be aware of. More concrete examples are things like linting. So that's something you can imagine an accessibility checker or spell check in sort of the most simple sense for your design. On the other side, you get things like generative AI, showing you different examples of things, things that you might not think of as yourself. Sort of the AI is something you can bounce ideas off of. What you want, though, is going to ultimately depend on your use case. In practice, this sort of looks like this. I put it as a continuum. I'm not entirely sure that it is right as a continuum. Would love to talk to folks about that. But I think on one end, there's sort of this adherence. How can AI help you follow best practices, whatever they might be? So for some people, that might be accessibility guidelines, that might be a design system, that might be something else. Others might be, and then on the other hand, you have this innovation. So systems, how AI is backed by lots of data, hopefully, and it probably knows about things that you don't. So what can it tell you, or how can it inspire you? Oops, went backwards. Let's go forwards. So when we ask people about likelihood to adopt, there's sort of this tentative acceptance. I might say people are cautiously optimistic about AI in their design tools. On one hand, there's clearly a sufficiency win. If you need to create 10 versions of the same thing, but with slight modifications, for example, different devices, different layouts, that's something you can easily speed up with an assistive tool. Or you can imagine how that would be beneficial. On the other hand, you have something, there's this concern about agency. If I give too much, one thing we heard repeatedly is if I give too much control to the AI, is it going to misunderstand me? Am I going to spend more time fixing mistakes it makes than time I would save like actually doing this? And worse, some people say, if I give over too much control to the AI, am I going to lose control of the design? Is it really going to be my work anymore? Who's in the driver's seat here? So there's this is really, I think this is an appropriate use of continuum. There needs to be a balance, and where that balance falls is going to be for different people. Will be different for different people, rather. So the way that I think it's easiest from our research to sum up how practitioners are thinking about AI in their design tools is a partnership. The UXers we spoke with want AI to be a creative partner to them, but they want to be able to sign off on any decision that the AI makes. Moreover, there's this degree, I would say, this access of trust. Some people will trust AI. That's going to depend on your context, your familiarity with it, the other contexts in which you're using smart tools or smart things. Others will be more skeptical. It will also likely depend on what you're trying to do. When we ask people what would make you trust AI or trust an AI-driven tool, a lot of UXers point to the data source. How do we know that something is recommended? Where did the data come from? Who is curating it? Who's training the model? What parameters are used to train the model? Remember also that most of us don't really know a lot about the underpinnings of AI. So there's a lot of mystery behind this, and you want to make sure that you're establishing trust with users. I think this is a really big topic and a really critical one, and something that we should absolutely be talking about more. One thing I mentioned earlier is this tension where things seem like AI, but they're not actually AI. And I think the lesson here is that anytime somebody thinks that something's AI, we need to keep these parameters in mind. This was a study that some folks on my team did on the Material Theme Builder, which is a tool on material.io that takes colors from an image to generate a color palette dynamically. And in the study, participants thought that this feature was powered by AI and asked a lot of questions about trust and how it worked and what the algorithm was doing. So again, the message here is to consider situations where AI might not be involved, but end users still think it is. And then you really want to be looking at that perceived value, concept testing, making sure that the intent is clear and the comfort and the trust are there. Another resource that Google has is the Pair Guidebook, and I'll send out all these links afterwards. This is a resource that was put together by AI practitioners at Google about how to design and evaluate different kinds of AI-driven features or products. Lots of really good resources in there, both about user research and data science and other things. So do check that out, and I'll send the link. So in sum, I think we see opportunities to help UXers follow best practices. With AI, I think that there's a lot of stuff that a lot of directions this can continue to go in, and it's obviously an emerging and nascent field. Would love to hear from other people who are in this space. A couple of different places that we've heard about in our research where I think there is potential are things like best practices around accessibility, also potentially translation or internationalization, where the consequences of not following these best practices is tremendous and could be problematic. But also, as new devices and surfaces emerge, it's going to become really important to think about how to design for new contexts, including contexts in which practitioners may not be familiar. We can't all be experts in everything. So how might we leverage AI to guide designers in these spaces? And with that, thank you. Take questions on Slack, but really appreciate your time. And I want to thank my colleagues as well for their support in this presentation. Thanks, everyone.